Total Recall was a really interesting screenplay. I read it around 1980 or so. It was always a great screenplay, but it kind of fell apart in the second half. David Cronenberg is the director in the beginning, and that was the tone of it. It was going to be dark. Patrick Swayze was supposed to be in it. Richard Dreyfuss was supposed to play the lead, and then Arnold had always liked it and brought it to Coralco. They had to pay a kind of a ridiculous price in order to get it.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is screenwriter Gary Goldman, who has been responsible for being involved in some of the most incredible films, especially in the sci-fi genre, particularly being the writer on Total Recall and executive producer on Steven Spielberg's Minority Report. Although we talked about Total Recall and very briefly about Minority Report, the conversation focuses a lot also on the future elements of the film that were predicted way back then that are coming true now, of course, with a lot of in-depth conversation about the film itself. So without further ado, here's my conversation with screenwriter Gary Goldman for Total Recall, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining on Kingdom of Dreams podcast to talk about the film Total Recall. Truly appreciate it. I obviously went through your credit. One of my childhood films that I watched several times was Big Trouble in Little China, which you wrote. Minority Report is one of my favorite films, which you, I think, were EP on.
Yes.
So phenomenal work. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Two of the films, among many of the films that you worked on, two of them are my Philip K. Dick stories, right? The short
Right.
stories that he's worked on.
Well, actually, three.
Three, which was the
Next,
third one?
Next is also from a Philip K. Dick short story.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's credited that way, but in a sense, you're correct because I only kept the merest central idea of the short story.
Got it. Got it. So was there a fascination with his stories that kind of, I mean, they are about future, and it's kind of weird
Right.
how all of that is sort of unfolding in front of us right now.
Yeah.
Where did that fascination come from? How did you get introduced to his work and decided to sort of take it upon yourself to pursue that?
It happened more or less accidentally.
Hmm.
Um, um, Basically, I had always loved science fiction as a kid, but I wasn't a particularly avid fan of Philip K. Dick. And then the screenplay for Total Recall came to my attention at a certain point, and it led 7 or 8 or 9 or years later to working on the screenplay. And that led to Minority Report, and that led to, basically suddenly now I had a trend going here, and I pursued it with Next, which came from a short story called The Golden Man. And then I continued it one more time with a project called Variable Man from a novella called Variable
Hmm.
Man, which I wrote as a spec screenplay with a collaborator named a writer named Angus Fletcher, which we did not sell. So I had this run of three consecutive Philip K. Dick projects, and then one more, and at that point, I sort of the string was broken. But I realized a number of years ago that I had a friend a long time ago who had touted me on Philip K. Dick as being a great, brilliant writer, and that, and he ended up making a Philip K. Dick movie himself. He did. His name is John Allen Simon, and he wrote and directed a small film based on, oh, I can't remember, one of Dick's later works, and he almost got made a movie called "Flow My Tears," the policeman said. And at
Hmm.
one point, he even had Tom Cruise attached to it. And I realized that somewhere in my mind, his original introduction to me might have planted the seed, and I wanted to acknowledge that today because I haven't mentioned it before. I've always sort of explained to myself that my interest in Philip K. Dick developed on its own without any precedent. But he was there, and he told me about it, and he was a fan before I was.
Right. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Um, I find it, and then please tell me if this is like just a generic observation.
Yeah,
When in the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s, there were a ridiculous amount of sci-fi films like that sort of
yeah,
foretold the future, right?
right.
But if you look in the current climate, there's not that many, other than like alien invasions or things like that.
Mm,
But there's nothing like Total Recall that kind of tells you the future or predicts the future or
right.
Minority Report. Am I quick in assessing that? Is that something you have seen too, if you think about it?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would agree with that. For example, The
No.
Matrix.
Well,
I mean,
Matrix came in the 90s, right?
that's that to me that's yesterday. But yeah, it may be that but that since then most of the ideas have not been really explored. They've been explored on a more microscopic level. For example, Ex Machina. This is a good sci-fi movie that explores the borderline between life, human intelligence, and
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, and it's
Yeah.
excellent. Um, and then I thought there was a great animated movie called was it The Hendersons versus the Machines,
Oh, yes,
which was
yes, yes.
I mean, and that and I which sort of dealt with some of the same issues that I was dealing with in my Variable Man adaptation. And I thought, yeah, that's right on, that's right on. But and but I do feel that, of course, we're about, and then since then, science has overtaken science fiction. I mean, what's happening right now with AI is uh, it's happening in real life. And so I found that when I look around and see what people do with AI, in terms of, sci-fi movies, that it's not very interesting. And that I have a lot of ideas for what I think is interesting about the future of AI and humanity. And I would like to write some stuff about that. But I do think that these themes, I would predict that we're about to have a huge resurgence of interesting science fiction as people now explore the dramatic and thematic opportunities of thinking through AI. And with those, and with so many, some of them are bound to be interesting. I don't know that it's not that easy to get ahead of this curve. I mean, for example, what is science in terms of science fiction showing you the future before it's about to happen? I feel very much that the thing that's about to happen is ahead of our ability to envision it.
Mm, mm.
And so basically, there are things like we're very close to Terminator, right? We're very close to the idea that people can easily imagine automatic robots, and the idea that our military decision making will become need to be so fast that it's computer versus computer, the humans will be left out of the loop, and we really will be dependent on the computers. And then I think William Gibson, even from the very beginning of his career with Neuromancer, imagined very interesting perspectives on what this meant. With, for example, the immortalization of a person's intelligence or the immortalization of a group intelligence. These, I think, are more advanced ideas. I've always been a little bit surprised that it's taken so long for them to get to the screen, maybe because they seem a little too internal. But they're finally getting around to doing Neuromancer as a limited series.
Mm, okay.
And so I think that the more interesting, the things that we can't do quite yet, um, are going to start coming around again. And then of course as the scientific advances actually happen, of course we'll just keep moving. But it's a little bit like, how far ahead do your headlights work? I mean, if you're
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
imagine, I mean, we've already glimpsed the Matrix, and it's pretty hard to go beyond that. I mean, that's a little bit of a hard, everything is inside the computer. So it's, I do think that it's going to, it will require some real imagination. And I have some ideas on doing, because I think it basically what happens is that it starts to enter the realm of religion. And basically science fiction start, with the lie, we're now about to have the technology to recapitulate religion. I mean, the things, for example, I used to feel like, well, I can't believe in God that any being could actually know everything that's going on and what's going on in everybody's life and what they're thinking. And now I realize, wow, but that was so limited of me because we human beings are almost on the verge of putting a little chip in every person's head and then connecting it to a computer and having the computer understand everything and then giving you the opportunity to become immortal, having your identity downloaded in some digital form into the computer and for you to live forever inside of the computer and for the computer to be able to judge you morally and to decide whether you get access to this immortality based on a moral algorithm that it's developed. And if not, or even a Hindu version where you have to keep reliving this game over and over again until finally you get it right. So I think all of, basically that's to me, yeah, I guess I should keep writing my science fiction, but this is yes, I think these things are coming. I think we're very close to having the ability for a computer to make a very good simulation of your entire psyche, and that
Mm.
you could participate in this throughout your lifetime. It charts everything you do, every click stroke, every click, everything you've read, it reads along with you, all your experiences. It and it, I mean, I'm probably not going to go into this business, but I mean, I definitely believe that you could work on an ongoing simulation of yourself, so that the simulation, you could say, you can keep testing it and testing it, and what would it do in this situation? And the computer keeps testing your simulation against you and what you actually do. And then you critique it and you say, no, what it got wrong here was that I was thinking this, and that's what caused me to do that. And little by little, the simulation could become an almost exact predictor of you. And you could meet it, and you could say, well, if I were gone, if I were dead, and this thing lived on, I would really feel that I was still there. I mean, my consciousness might not be there, but as far as everybody else was concerned, in terms of like having a kind of immortality, this would be very, very close to it. And I don't think we're far from that at all.
Yeah, no, I actually will go one step before that. I mean, not in a direct way, but like if you look at our browser history and now you look at ChatGPT, almost everybody uses it. So pretty much there is wherever it's going to a central data system,
Yeah,
somebody is, or whether it's AI or a group of human beings or whatever, or a combination of both, is monitoring that, right? So I think we're already there, but yeah, the chip obviously takes it to the next level. And sometimes, what's scary to me is I think one thing that I keep remembering over and over again. I remember Minority Report. There was a scene when John Anderton's character, Tom Cruise, played by Tom, enters in Gap, and there's a retina scan like from 20
yeah,
feet away, and I used to wonder, oh boy, I wonder if that's going to happen in my lifetime. And that's been happening for the last 7 8 years at least, not
yeah, yes,
mainstream, but now it's almost, you can do facial recognition in a matter of seconds.
yes,
So it's crazy that how that has unfolded, and a lot of stuff in Total Recall as well. This idea of the dream and whether it's real, it's kind of like Matrix. Who knows where we are right now, right? I mean, you can
yeah,
argue the religion part of it and everything, but is this a dream? Our dreams are a reality? Who knows, right? So it's just this,
right. Well, I do think we're going to be spending more and more of our time inside of fictional realities. I mean, I do think that people will be able to have, several different lives going on at the same time. The idea, what would they call it? I'm trying to remember. There was a big boom about 20 years ago for creating, you enter virtual realities and you can interact within them. And,
uh,
and
I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but I would imagine the thing that comes close to is holodeck from Star Trek, where you create like,
yeah, right.
uh,
Yeah. But
yeah,
yeah, so I think that really we are going to be, we are going to be, hold on, I have to get rid of a message here that's right in front of you. Um, um, Everything you can think of is going to happen. I
yeah.
mean, and people will be having full relationships with artificial personalities.
It's already happening.
And
That's already happening.
yeah, so. So when you ask so I'm just sort of getting back to your original question
Sure.
about sci-fi being ahead and trying to imagine the future. I mean, sci-fi will be, we have like our headlights in a vast desert of darkness, and our headlights illuminate just a few feet in front of us. And I think that, this level of, the science fiction in the movies will continue to illuminate, 150 or 100 yards in front of us reliably as we move forward. And then there'll be the visionaries, who can try to, to see the things that are not within your headlights yet. That's a little harder. And I think it, and that's the part that I worry about the most. I mean, the thing that concerns me is, what does it mean to be an individual and to have free will? Um, and uh, uh, so, for example, in Variable Man, which, I was very interested in this, and this is what I was trying to explore. That if you have an AI that's been following your life and knows everything about you, and you walk into a bar and you say, "Yeah, I wonder what I should order," and the AI says, "Well, you generally like Guinness, but here the Guinness is a little flat." So, well, based on everything else we know, so we think that the thing that'll make you happiest here is to get a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, uh, and don't get we know you're really tempted to order a hamburger with onions, but don't, because So no, I'm saying, and if you listen to the AI, you'll be perfectly happy, and if you choose things on your own, you won't be as happy. And so the smartest computer in the world is the one that fixes you up with your mate.
Mm.
And if you decide and be really stubborn that you want to choose your own mate, you'll probably be wrong and unhappy. And if you do what your friends are doing and listen to the computer and marry the one that it picks out for you, you have a 99% chance of doing better than you would on your own. And and so on and so forth, until finally, what decisions do you still make? In other words, if you know what's smart and best, the only way to have free will is to willfully do something stupid. Otherwise, you're just going to do what's normal and rational and likely to work out. And then, so what is free will now? Free will now is not knowing enough. Because if you knew enough, you'd know exactly what to do. The only reason we need free will is because we're living in this little gap between instinct and the actual answer that we don't know. And the closer we come to actually knowing that answer, the smaller and smaller is our range of free will. And I'm unfortunately, I have a pretty pessimistic view of human nature. Most people flatter ourselves that we're unique and irreplaceable, and we're inventing everything we do as we go along. But I really feel we're dangerously close, especially with to people losing the little, little by little by little, the capacity, the brain muscle, to make that willful decision not to, it's only in that sort of quantum space of not being sure of what to do that you actually even have free will. Because if you know what to do, you do it. You're only really exercising free will in that little tiny space between I'm not sure. And so I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm being too philosophical here, but knowing too much, having the computer know too much, having it all figured out, every step in that direction changes what it means to be human. So if a computer takes your job, well, maybe the government will put you on the stipend, and everybody will stay home and play games all day or be creative. But if the computer is able to make the decisions for you, should you stay in this relationship or not? What's left of us? And I think that's an interesting question that I think science fiction hasn't dealt with yet. If I were to write something new, I would write about that.
Interesting. That's actually a very good observation, and I agree with you 100%. And I think again, even with this, I'll go one step backwards. You talked about
Hmm. Hmm.
relationship. You know, yeah, marriages don't work. Things happen. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was no such thing as a marriage therapist. Now there is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people resort to that. Now, sometimes that may work out, but at the end of the day, it goes back to your argument. If we are not able to have that free will of making mistakes and figuring things out on our own, and we're
Yes.
relying on others, whether it's human and the next step is machine, then what's the point? What's the purpose? And that's the same thing we
Right.
do in our conversations too. Like, oh, do you think I should do this? What do you think?
Mm.
To a friend or somebody, do you think I should
Yeah.
eat? So there's that level of uncertainty unless there should be spontaneity.
Yeah. Yeah. But the problem here is, I think, a problem that you find in most science fiction, which is that, I mean, there's literary science fiction and there's movie science fiction, and
Mm,
generally speaking, most of the really interesting stuff is not necessarily. I mean, I mean, they don't make a science fiction movie unless it's highly visual, and generally that means expensive and spectacular. And so, basically, to deal with the interesting ideas, you have to, be able to package it in a very visually
of course.
spectacular. And so that's part of the reason why it's hard to write a good intelligent science fiction movie, because they don't really want the ideas, but if you can, you really have to work very hard to slip them into a sort of a conventional story with a lot of production value. And then there's the sort of technological prediction part, like in Total Recall, and in Minority Report. They did a great job of that in Minority Report. Um, you know, but a lot of that is available from consultants.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean, you say, okay, what's going to happen next, and then you visualize it, and and you say, a world of cars that are driving themselves at 300 miles an hour, and then you put it on screen, and and now, of course, also there's been a trend, because you're talking about time. The visual capabilities of visual special effects, it has completely changed. It's revolutionary. I mean, I remember the first, beginning of digital effects. I went to this little convention called SIGGRAPH, and
Yep.
now finally, and yeah, and it was about using. They had these. It was in commercials. They would take there was letters A, B, C, and then turn them inside out, and you could fly in between the letters, and that was new at the time. And now you can have fake people, fake environments. I mean, pretty soon. I mean, obviously, we still shoot movies on location because the capabilities of the computer are not great enough, and you can tell the difference. And that primo experience of being in the movie theater and being fooled, and thinking that it's real. I mean, that's something that we like. But that's a technological issue now. Little by little by little, the fake will become more and more real. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what it is that continues to shock and surprise people in terms
Yeah.
of what the future holds, because so much is already now, because of the capabilities of the visual effects capabilities, it has pushed that way ahead, that you can convincingly imagine things in the
Anything.
future.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I imagine the future might become more. I mean, I think that for example, in Total Recall, there's something I'm really, really proud of. There's a girl in the recall, the receptionist in the recall anteroom is she's doing her fingernails. And I thought,
Mm,
okay, I mean, the ways in which technology will infiltrate our normal lives is, I still think, kind of interesting. But the obvious thing is, I mean, I've written a number of car chases, saying, okay, the cars are being driven by the computer, and they're going 300 miles an hour, and then you have a person on foot, or another person in another vehicle, and then someone manages to hack it, and they're trying to, they're going 60 miles an hour, or 80 or 100 miles. It's imagine the guy, the driver of the F1 race car is catapulted in the future where everything is going 300 miles an hour. What does he do? I mean, these are like fun movie things that, I think audiences will still respond to. Um,
yeah.
but I don't have anything in my pocket right now to, that would be visually spectacular. I mean, I have ideas for how the future will really be different and fun and spectacular. I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is going to be a lot of people sitting in a chair, immersed in something, and that So then the real world becomes, we're now living in this world of infinite visual possibilities.
Yeah.
And then not only that, we're going to be able to change the channel like we do now on TV and be in any of those. We'll be able to be
Interesting.
in them and to live them. They're all going to be um, expanded out into the tens, in other words, the possibilities that are available, the root, the past, and it'll become more and more and more realistic. And
Yeah.
I just a couple of months ago I tried out the Apple. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, the VR headset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
App.
it's fantastic. But the most interesting thing about it to me was the feeling of what you're experiencing when it's so real and it's all around you. Suddenly, you it evokes real emotions in you in a way that looking at a lower resolution, less immersive image doesn't. I remember a while back, Doug Trumbull had this 70 millimeter process of like 60 frames a second,
Sure.
and they had a demonstration of it, and it was amazing because it basically it fools your brain better, and because it fools your brain better, you're more immersed in it, and it's more of an experience. And it wasn't necessarily more dramatic or more interesting, but I mean, your brain knew. I mean, watching that, you would come out of it, the screen disappeared. It wasn't you were not aware of a surface anymore. You were definitely much more like there. They did the usual roller coaster shit, in your stomach. I mean, you fools your brain into that. And now the Apple thing was that way. And basically, the most powerful thing that it did was that you're hanging in a sack on the side of like El Capitan in Yosemite,
Nice.
and there's a pretty girl, and like she comes up and she reaches out to you, and the visceral reality of her presence, like making your heart beat a little faster and things like that, was just infinitely more lifelike and powerful than watching it on the screen. So when we have these, I mean, as it continues, we'll be able to, when we go into these immersive environments, they're going to be satisfying or challenging or difficult or whatever. But I mean, it's going to be more than just like, it's not going to be that easy to detach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be better and better and better, and more of our lives are going to be spent inside of these environments.
I I agree. And by the way, the way you talked about the Apple VR headset, you should do some spokesman work for Apple.
Oh,
It's gonna
thanks. Well,
be.
I think it will be particularly. I mean, right now, I think it's really useful for things like nostalgia. I mean,
Yeah.
for you to be able to go into your past and your pictures and to experience them that way is already a huge improvement. And the fact that the headset is heavy and a little uncomfortable and all, I mean,
It's the
there are
first
some
iteration.
problems. There's some
Yeah.
problems with it now, but I would say that, I mean, if I were starting a family, I would get one of those immediately, invest in it, and then I would go, chick, 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 and take pictures of my babies growing up, and
Yeah.
then go back and relive them because I think it's. I'm a little surprised that it's not catching on that much for among that segment, because I think that capability is already there.
I think it's more about the price than the product, just because with the
Mhm.
economy and everything. But I
Yeah,
do think that I recently just a couple of I think it was last month, but we were invited to someone's birthday, and there was like one of those VR games that
yeah,
you put that thing on the helmet, and the graphics were okay. They were nothing fantastic, but it was basically you're on this ship, and there's aliens, and you're trying to survive, and you're trying to kill as many as possible. That's the whole idea. But I think it was a 30-minute session, and I was so into it. Like,
yeah,
we had like a gun, like a toy gun, and I felt like I was like running around, jumping, holding the gun like this because I was so into it. And then I saw the video of us outside in the real world moving around. We
Yeah,
looked like a bunch of fools,
yeah.
walking around the open environment. But it's interesting your theories on that, and I think one of the things they talked about the visual um, importance in a film more than the script. Not to take away anything from Total Recall, it had a great story, but I think the production design and the special effects and all that, even for today's time, I just saw it like a few days ago,
Mm-hmm,
it's quite remarkable, right?
mm-hmm.
And it goes along with the films like Blade Runner and Minority Report, where everything is not extremely futuristic. There's still elements
Yeah,
of the present.
yes.
What kind of what when you got onto Total Recall and you started writing it, and I think you had a couple other writers too, at least according to IMDb. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and how did that all process start, and then getting into production, and how involved were you in production, if at all?
Okay. Um, okay, so the project, the Total Recall was a really interesting screenplay. I read it around 19, oh, I don't know, 1980 or so.
Mm,
And it didn't get made until I guess it was released in 1991.
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
yeah. So it took a long time. Um, it had been Ron Shusett was the guiding light of the project, and he was working with Dan O'Bannon. He teamed up with Dan O'Bannon on Alien, and they were a
Mm-hmm.
team, and they did it, and so they worked together on Total Recall. It was always a great screenplay, but it kind of fell apart in the second half, and then everybody kept trying to make the second half work, and it went through, but everybody, everybody wanted to make the movie, and it had. David Cronenberg as the director in the beginning, and I mean, that was the tone of it. It was going to be dark, a lot like the remake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they got, I don't know how long David Cronenberg was on it. Patrick Swayze was supposed to be in it. Richard Dreyfuss was supposed to play the lead. Bruce Beresford went into pre-production with it in Australia,
Mm.
I think with Patrick Swayze. And then Dino De Laurentiis' company went bankrupt.
Yep.
And then Arnold had always liked it and brought it to Coralco, and maybe he brought it to Paul. And so suddenly Paul, Arnold, Coralco was this big independent production company. They snapped it up, and they had to pay a kind of a ridiculous like price in order to get it. I mean, it was, in other words, what they were buying was a screenplay, but to get the screenplay, they had to pay for all the money that Dino De Laurentiis had spent on it for 10 years. But they did
Mm.
because they wanted the screenplay that badly. And then after that, I was the only writer, but there had been many writers before that. So, in terms of the look of the film, I mean, Ron wanted it to end on Mars. He wanted the whole Mars section. So, um, but he didn't have a lot of, and there was the Johnny Cab, and there was the pulling the thing out of the nose. That was from Ron, and Ron had also, it was already the Quado was there, the alien. A lot of the smaller things, the environmental window in Arnold's apartment where he's able to sort of watch there's a nature scene outside, and then the TV, the the fingernails, the specifics of recall, and the whole idea that it might really be real and not just a fantasy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's more or less resolved in the earlier screenplays at about the half point, and Paul wanted to keep that going throughout the whole movie, as long as possible, and we did. We kept it to the end where Melina says, Arnold says, "What if this is all a dream?" And then she says, "Kiss me quick before you wake up." And so it's really continued all the way through, and that was important. The uh, the the idea of the underground reactor was from Ron and Dan O'Bannon. The specific look of it was from some. Actually, my wife gets a little bit of a tip here. There's, I think, a guy named Hugh Ferris, who's an artist, and he did some Art Deco drawings, and that was the specific inspiration for the way the reactor looks underground.
Mm.
Um, the um, the idea that Arnold would be hiding inside of a very large woman was my idea, but the idea that her head would split open was Ron Botin's idea. Ron Botin is, Paul's practical special effects guy, and so
Yeah, yeah.
he's more like a puppeteer kind of. He builds actual devices, and then you have to shoot them just right. And then, if you shoot, if he makes them pretty well, I mean, if you see them in real life, they're not at all convincing. But if you do them right and they move right and you cut them right, then it's like, they seem real enough, especially for that time.
Nice. Yeah, no, the visual effects of that the head kind of opening
Yeah.
up like in little blocks. I always thought it was kind of weird how it was done, but at the same time it was so unique that how it was done that you've never seen anything like that even since then, right? It just stands out.
Well, the thing is that there's certain things in a movie which make sense and certain things that don't. But if you buy into them while they're happening really fast, you
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
accept it. And so the
Like the
idea
picture.
that that like is that fat lady Arnold? I mean, that's a great disguise. How could that be? And then the transition to paying it off was great. That was brilliant and innovative, and it was so bizarre. No one could possibly have anticipated it, right? I mean, there's no way you could have said, "Oh, I know what's going to happen next. The head is going to split open." I mean, right? No,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, many, many steps ahead of the audience in terms of, and that's the fun. I mean, more part of the fun of filmmaking is to be ahead of the audience. I mean, that's sort of the game we play because um, most of the audience has seen a lot of movies, and you're playing the game you play is you have to satisfy certain expectations and then defy certain expectations, and and the more things have already been done, the harder and harder it is to fool an audience so they don't see, well, oh yeah, this is solution one, this is solution 47, this is, I mean, these are things, it's very, very hard to play this game with a sophisticated audience. Um, so what you want is to surprise them in a way that afterwards they say, I didn't see it coming, but it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's hard. It really is. It's a hard space to work in. Um, oh, what was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, the three-breasted woman. That was me. But that's not exactly an imagine, a vision of the future, but it is it was a kind of a funny idea. But also, I would say part of the look that you're asking for is Paul he has a vision that he used in RoboCop and that he kept in Total Recall. He didn't want to do dazzling things that seemed, he wanted everything to seem normal and real. There were still newspapers, people were still having
Yeah,
relationships.
yeah.
It wasn't sort of taking place in a world where there are totalitarian leaders and everything is different. And it's no, it's like it's our world, just a little bit in the future. Everything should be recognizable, and you can figure out how they got from here to there. And then
Yeah.
nothing that's there is something that you couldn't imagine. And that the surprises happen within that space. Not, oh, we're going to dazzle you, we're going to show you, a spaceport. That wasn't it. It wasn't to try and show something unimaginably grandiose.
Yeah.
It was to try and make it believable within a kind of a near future. But and that was tough for a few reasons. The premise seemed quite far-fetched at the time. It doesn't seem that far-fetched now. So the idea is how futuristic does the world have to look in order for you to believe that you can buy a memory?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the idea that oh, wait a second, in the the technology is glitchy and this is a malfunction. That's kind of a fun idea that makes it feel very real, and a little bit of a small innovation from like a future where everything works perfectly, and then uh, what was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, Mars. I mean, it's underground. It's claustrophobic. They've got domes. There's not enough air. It's dirty. It's grimy. But then there's an alien reactor underneath it, which is an unimaginably futuristic technology, which not only is capable of transforming Mars, but it's capable of doing so in the course of a movie sequence while you're watching. right?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest stretch, which is that we're going to show Mars being terraformed before your very eyes, and that it's going to come in time that between the time that the domes break and the people don't have air anymore, and the time the planet is terraformed and they can breathe real natural air from the atmosphere is going to happen, in real time. And and in a sense, we get away. That's quite preposterous. There's absolutely no reason to think that could ever happen. And we pull it off with movie magic and sound effects and things shaking and cutting here and cutting there and trying just sort of creating our own false um, uh, reality. But in part, it's that the movie feels a little bit like a fable, and it
Mm.
keeps going deeper and deeper from things that are just very real. People living in small apartments, to the idea that there's alien shit underneath and nobody quite knows, and there's a guy with a mutant inside of another person, right? And then they're gonna reerase, unerase Arnold's memory and put him back to being Hauser, and that's possible. And then finally you go there and you see it, and you're there underneath it, and you see the size and the grandiosity of it, and then you finally come up to this place where there's an alien handprint, and little by little by little, we kind of relax the audience's sense of that this is going to has to be real, to the idea that this is fantastic. This is beyond your imagination. This is something from cosmic interaction. And I would say that the movie creaks a little bit at that point in the end. And I was never too fond of the bulging eyes shot at the end, but I felt that as a kind of a poetic ending, combined with the idea that it might just all be a fantasy. I mean, Blue Sky. I don't know if you remember. Blue
Yeah,
Skies
yeah.
on Mars is. Yeah. So I mean, the idea is at the end you can say, "Oh yeah, oh my God, this is the story. Blue Skies on Mars," and and you accept it, and the whole thing is going to a fantasy that's gone haywire, and the movie ends. So, you know. Now,
Yeah.
you asked, in terms of my participation, this was the best work experience of my life. I work with Paul. Paul loves his writers. He doesn't have a Hollywood idea, which is sort of like writers are interchangeable and replaceable, and you don't want them around on the set. His writers are there with him on the set. We work really closely. Um, he shot the entire screenplay. I don't think there was one. He didn't add anything. He didn't improvise anything. He didn't take out anything. The one change he made, there was one scene we changed, which is the where the lady the old lady tries to take away the briefcase. That
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
that's not one of my favorite scenes, but it worked. It saved us a few $1 million. It cut out a big action sequence, so we put that in instead. I get a call one day from I'm in my office. I had a little office at the studios at Churubusco in Mexico City. They said Paul needs you on the set. Rush to the set, and there's a scene where uh, Sharon has just come to Mars, and the whole Dr. Edgemar scene has happened, and the walls blow in, and she's standing above him, and and the other bad guys are there, and Paul says, "Well, she's on the ground. Well, I want her to say something like she should handcuff him. What should she say?" I said, "Cuff him." Okay. And so okay, great. So Sharon, say cuff him, and then they shoot the scene, and she says cuff him, and I said there was a journalist on the set, and I turned to the journalist. I said, I'm sure glad they don't pay me by the word.
That's amazing. That's such a cool story. I mean, Paul's work is phenomenal, right? Like RoboCop is, to me, still is one of the most violent movies ever made, but it's such so humanistic. Like the whole film is him trying to find his identity, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what you thought of the new Total Recall with Colin Farrell and
Hmm.
Kate Beckinsale, which was actually shot in Toronto here, where I am.
Hmm.
Um, it looked, if I hadn't seen the original Total Recall, I would have said, yeah, this is a
Hmm.
great film. Yeah, it was very kind of like present times and everything, but there was just this film noir type of feel of the original one that the new one didn't carry. I don't know if you had any thoughts. I think you were kind of involved in it, or were you?
No, no,
No?
no, I wasn't involved.
Okay.
Because I don't have separated rights.
Oh, I
I
see.
mean,
I see.
I mean, I came on as the last writer, and so I don't share in the story credit. But, but on the other hand, Ron Shusett did have separated rights, but he wasn't involved either. So no, basically they just went off and did it on their own.
Mm,
And I think um, well, that their basic idea was to do something more like the original version of Total Recall. I mean, the original Ron Shusett Dan O'Bannon version, but also to take out all the silliness, to make it that it was a good enough story, that the ideas are interesting enough. We can make this without getting corny. We don't have to go to Mars. We don't, we can make it
yeah,
about
yeah,
we can make it about what it's really about. I mean, by the way, Paul and I considered taking Mars out. And and Ron, she said it was in his contract that you couldn't take Mars out. Really, I mean, because Ron
yeah,
had made the deal for Total Recall right after Alien, and Alien was such a hit that he had a lot of clout, and so he
yeah,
was, he got the presentation credit, he got the idea that you can't. The studios are notoriously protective of having the right to do whatever they want. If you buy a novel, you don't you give it up. You don't. Generally speaking, it's very, very, very rare for a studio to give any kind of control over the script to anyone, but themselves. Even directors, who want the final cut in control, they only a few get it. They're very, very, very protective. Ron was very shrewd. He boiled down like 6 or 7 points that he considered to be essential to the story. And if they changed any of those 6 or 7 points, then the project would revert to him. And one of those
mm,
points was that it had to end up on Mars. So we really couldn't, we couldn't do it, even though Paul didn't really like that very much, and I didn't like it very much. And we had to struggle really hard to sort of make it work.
yeah.
Um, and in fact, I'll tell you, I'll get back to your. Well, no, first I'll answer your question about the sequel. So I think that was their goal, and I would say that I was sympathetic to this goal because it would be, I do think that there's room for a serious version of Total Recall, and it's not entirely clear why. I mean, and I didn't think the movie was terrible. I don't think it was as bad as the reviews said, and
You're
of course I
talking about
was
the new
flat.
one, right?
Yeah, yeah, the newer one, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't as hard on it as the reviewers were, although I was happy to see that it got bad reviews because it made my, the original look better by comparison. But I wasn't that bad. We were invited to the premiere, and I went up, went to the director, and I told him I liked this movie, and but I do think that strangely enough, all in all, this certain thing that came together with Paul and Arnold and the script in the form it was in, tailored for Paul and Arnold, had such vivacity that that's really what was missing was this incredible vivacity that imbued. I mean, it's got enough in it. I felt this way when I saw RoboCop. It has enough in it for 3 movies, and so I was
Mm.
intimidated by that when I saw it in the theater, and then I was inspired and challenged to try and do something, to try and make our Total Recall as packed as RoboCop. And the pace is relentless. I think there's just something about it. It's very special, and Arnold is charming, I think. And I think that strangely enough, although Colin Farrell is there's no question he's a really great actor, and as a pure dramatic actor, he's a better actor than Arnold Schwarzenegger. But Arnold's performance is more endearing, and I would even say that to a certain extent, you feel it more. And I don't, I don't know why that is. I mean, but I really feel like I felt the predicament of Quaid as Arnold was going through it more than I did with Colin Farrell going through it. And that's the audience. That's what the audience wants. I mean, you're going to live through this, and so I do think that it was. I think probably it may be that in retrospect, people will not be as hard on that movie. I think they were a little too hard.
Yeah, no, I wasn't hard on it. I just thought it was not as good as the original one. I think to kind of talk about what you're saying that Arnold was a bit more endearing, and I think that is because, Colin Farrell, despite being a great actor, I mean, he's got a charming personality, charming looks and everything. Arnold may not be other than his bodybuilding, physique, but I think that what plays against it is there's this big guy trying going through all this problem, and even though you think he will overcome them, he's facing obstacles after obstacle. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger, the way he has his talking, I'll be back, like I'm the denominator,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
All the, right, his accent. I think that played in his favor too. Um, but I think it's as film is a collaboration effort, right? So there's a production design,
yeah.
there's writing, there's everything in there that just clicked. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the way I think the sets to me, like
Mm-hmm.
they made the film. Nothing against anybody else. Like, it was just one of those things that takes you into that place
Right,
of physical locations, and
right.
a lot of time and effort went into making them.
Yeah. Oh, so let me talk about that. The production designer was Bill Sandell, and just a few weeks ago there was the production design union
Conference,
guild.
okay. Yeah.
They arrange. They have a series of movies and they project them at the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. One of the
Hmm.
great old movie palaces. And they showed a 70 millimeter print of Total Recall, and Bill Sandell was there to speak about it. And Bill, um, he did. So there are two things there. One is that are the sets, and then the other thing are the locations. There were a lot of really great um, brutalist concrete
Yes.
architecture in around Mexico City that we used. There was the War Academy. There were some of the subway stations, and so we were lucky that there was a look there that we could just shoot in, and and then make the other sets match. So Earth was Mexico City. There were these, pieced together parts of Mexico City. Mars was, made to match, but of course, most of it is underground and industrial and
Sure.
rock. And I think he did a good job of that. I'll give you an interesting, I'll tell you the best anecdote um, from his commentary. So we had the Mexico City subway station for a couple of nights, a certain area where we could shoot in. And they were brutalist concrete and very modern looking. The problem was that the subway cars were brightly colored orange and blue and everything like that. So what he had to do for these scenes when they went to the railroad station, because they wanted, there was a palette, a futuristic palette they were working with, gray, silver, black, and so he had to paint all the these Mexico City subway trains silver. And then when we were done, they had to paint them black, yellow, and green and red.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, that look certainly was there, like the consistency of that silver, bluish, grayish elements in the walls and the subway and everything. And
Mm,
obviously the little town, I wouldn't call it a town, like little streets that they had created that goes into the restaurant.
yeah, yeah,
That was really, really, really well done. Yeah, no, again, it's a collaborative effort, and Total Recall, I mean, it's a great film, and this guy, I can't believe it's been 35 years,
yeah,
that long. But amazing. Like I love sci-fi, I love futuristic sci-fi, but Total Recall is definitely up there for me among Minority Report and Blade Runner. And even though I'm a huge Spielberg fan, I love Minority Report. To me, Blade Runner and Total Recall give Minority Report a little bit of an edge, not because they were better films, but in the circumstances of technology that was available at the time, as
yeah,
opposed to Minority Report, they did went above and beyond in making the worlds look as real as possible.
yeah, yeah. Well, I love Minority Report. I think it's a really good movie,
So do
and I
I.
was no, no, and I say that in part because I did a lot of writing on the movie. Ron Shusett and I wrote the first 4 or 5 drafts of Minority Report, and we didn't end up getting writing credit. We got our executive producer credit, but the writing credit we didn't get, even though a lot of what we wrote, and the ideas that we contributed did make it into the movie, and in part it has to do with I mean, I would say that according to one way of looking at the apportionment, in one way you could say it was just, and in another way there were a lot of the Writers Guild has rules, and because Ron and I were also producers on the movie, they were rules that I mean we could have actually contributed 80 something like 85% of the movie, the writing and still not gotten credit under the specific way rules they were using, because there was Ron and me, and there was the short story Minority Report was originally brought to my attention by a writer named Robert Goethals, who is, I think, an unproduced writer, although he might have a couple of TV episodes. And he was the boyfriend of one of my wife's friends. And he said, "Do you know about Minority Report?" And I kept him involved. And he worked on the first draft with us together. But then various things happened, and
Yeah.
and we ended up doing some drafts, just Ron and me, when we got to 20th Century Fox. It started off at Coralco, we moved it to 20th Century Fox. And so because of that, and because we were producers, we didn't get credit. But I do think that Minority Report is great. And I think that it, conceptually speaking, it pulls back from its idea. And maybe that's one of the reasons why. I mean, it's, for example, it's really great. I mean, they found a very emotional reason for Anderton, that his son was kidnapped, and I mean, and
Hmm.
that's really great. That's Scott Frank and Spielberg working together, and those are great solutions. But Blade Runner says that Rutger Hauer is a real, complete human being. It doesn't at the end. It doesn't say he's less than a human being. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's okay. It says he's a full human being. That's really a radical idea. In Total Recall, the whole idea is that Arnold chooses to. He says, "I don't want to go back to being the asshole that I was. I feel like a completely real person, and my moral sense says that I want to remain a good person, not be a bad person, and sort of sell out into being Hauser again." And that's a very radical notion. Also, the idea that the whole thing could have been a dream is a very radical notion. It's not just a technological trick.
Yeah.
In Minority Report, the short story, Anderton commits the crime knowing that he's going to be punished for it, but that he has to do it anyway. In other words, he doesn't use free will to escape his fate.
Mm.
He finds out why, given who he was and what his values are, what he needs to do. He has to kill this guy, even though he's going to be punished for it. And so the idea is that it doesn't let you know that the precogs are wrong. It says the precogs are right. Now, but he's going to do it anyway, even though he knows he's going to be punished, because the future of his society depends on it, at least according to his own values. And Spielberg turned this into a kind of a more or less a very familiar story, which is that you have free will and you can change. No prophecy is fixed, and you can change the future, which
Yeah.
I felt like he pulls that off brilliantly.
It
But
does.
it's not a radical. It's not a challenging idea.
Yeah.
And I would say that if he had actually stuck with that, I mean, everything else about Minority Report was so good. I mean, you can't really say it's flawed. It's not flawed. It's just that there's a certain level that it could have reached, which was, to really, which is to seize the mind expanding potential of science fiction, rather than to repeat the idea that we have free will. And although we're showing
Yeah.
you all this futuristic stuff, honestly, it doesn't count. No, I mean, it takes it could have taken the sci-fi story really seriously.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, Spielberg's approach to films is a lot different. That's just his style. He connects with the audience at a different level. I know quite a lot of people who say that the last good film they saw from Spielberg was Minority Report, which
Uh,
I beg to differ, but I see
mm,
why, because his career changed a lot after that. Like it became more, political films and historical
yeah,
films and all that. And that's fine. But Minority Report still is a great film. And yeah, and just to me, it was just I was looking at it from a technological standpoint, what was available, and Total Recall I think will hold the test of times, and I think it still does. The fact that there was a screening on 70 millimeter, a couple of weeks
yeah.
ago after 35 years, so it's a great film. Thank you for writing it,
Thank you.
and maybe I would love to talk to you about Big Trouble in Little China one day because that has a lot of childhood memories. I mean, when it came out, 84, 85,
Yeah,
something like that. I probably saw it in 86,
84. Yeah,
87. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So when I was 10 years old. So yeah, thank you so much for all the work.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a
I
real
appreciate it.
pleasure, a lot of fun.
Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that um, oh yeah, I'll add a nice idea. I'm going to give you a quote from Big Trouble in Little China. My favorite line in the screenplay that didn't make it into the movie.
Okay.
And Jack Burton says to Egg, "How did I get caught up in a Chinese person's fate? How did that happen?" And Egg says, "One big fate, everybody."
Oh God, that should have been in
So,
the
I,
film.
so that's such a great thought. I thought, okay, this is a great thought for the world. I want to get this out into the world, even if I can't get it into a movie. One big fate, everybody.
Well said. Well, that's a really nice line. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. I would love to have you again, maybe in the next couple of months or so, to talk about Big Trouble in Little China or anything else that you want to talk about. It was a pleasure
Uh,
talking not just about the film, but just whole, the science and the eventualities and the fiction part of it. So lovely.
Thank you.